When the body remembers what seemed lost, invisible portals open up without you even having to ask. There is a gesture, a movement, a sacred spiral. That since time immemorial has been inscribed in our most intimate fibers. A living, ancient pattern that has traveled through the centuries like a message sealed in the architecture of the flesh, waiting to be rediscovered. It is not a modern technique or an exercise invented by today's mind. It is a language engraved in the DNA of human movement, a vibrational password that allows us to open doors closed by fear, injury, and oblivion. The ancient mystery schools knew it well. They said it was the key, the forbidden sequence that freed that which was chained within us. They called it the spiral of return, the hidden gesture of creation. It was not transmitted by words, but by presence, by resonance. The master did not explain it, he simply incarnated it, and the disciple felt in his own cells the call to imitate it. Because this movement is not learned with the mind, it is awakened in the deepest memory of the body. When this spiral manifests, something begins to dissolve. Breathing changes its rhythm, the heart beats differently, and the energy that was asleep begins to reorganize itself as if it were finding again the lost riverbed of a river. Sometimes tears come for no apparent reason. Sometimes images from the past emerge as fleeting visions, and sometimes you simply experience an inner warmth that rises from the base of your spine to your chest. All these are not coincidences, they are signs that the body is responding to an ancestral pact, to a calling that existed before you had a name, before you were even born. The sages of Egypt described this practice as a ritual of rebirth. Initiates were taken to silent chambers, where they remained in darkness until the body, on its own, began to find the secret movement. It was not an imposed exercise, it was a memory that emerged. Hermes Trismegistus called it the gesture that reflects above what moves below and below what exists above. A small turn, almost imperceptible, capable of aligning the human body with the sacred geometry that sustains the stars. For the Hermetic monks, that movement was much more than a physical gesture. It was the bridge between the volatile mercury of the mind and the fixed gold of the essence. They dissolved internal impurities, not with visible fire, but with a secret heat, with the vibration that ascended from the base and met the heart. It was the alchemy of the body, the return to the origin, the reconfiguration of what had been deformed by pain, by fear, by the inherited stories that made us shrink. When the body bends in the right direction, it is not only muscle that moves, it is the whole story that begins to rewrite its end. That's why this pattern remained hidden for so long. Its power could not be surrendered to haste or simple curiosity. Only those who dared to surrender to the process could receive it. For the secret of the spiral is not control, but surrender. And the curious thing is that today, thousands of years later, science is beginning to discover echoes of this knowledge. Stephen Porges, creator of the polyvagal theory, demonstrated that rhythmic and subtle movements can reactivate the body's safety circuit, dissolving patterns of freezing that for years seemed to be part of our personality. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford, observes how small changes in movement dynamics reconfigure entire systems, from breathing to emotional balance. Bruce Lipton, in the field of epigenetics, confirms that repeated somatic experiences directly influence gene expression, rewriting automatic responses to stress. In other words, what the mystery schools used to call the sacred spiral is now beginning to be translated into scientific language as cellular reprogramming, nervous reorganization, somatic plasticity, and physics, from its own point of view, reminds us once again that the spiral is a universal design. It is in the orbits of the planets, in the formation of galaxies, in the shell of a snail, and in the double helix that forms life. So it is not a matter of belief. It is about recognizing patterns. And when that pattern is activated in your body, you don't need external evidence. You know it. Because you feel it. Your pulse changes. Your breathing reorganizes. Your internal temperature rises. Biology confirming what the symbol always announced. Science and mystery do not contradict each other. They complete each other. The blockages you have been carrying for years are not defects or curses. They are inverted codes, portals that instead of expanding have learned to contract. Instead of channeling energy, they retain it. And when you call them portals, something changes, because a portal by definition can be crossed. What looked like a wall becomes a door, and the key to that door is in the vibration. The first step in this practice is not to move, but to listen. A vibrational listening that does not seek to silence the body, but to perceive it with such precise attention that hidden patterns begin to reveal themselves. It is like approaching a wild animal, without haste, without threat, observing where the body trembles, where it contracts, where an unexpected warmth appears. It is not necessary to name it. It is enough to register it. That is the first sacred movement, somatic mapping. You haven't healed anything yet, and that's okay. The goal is not to run, but to map the territory faithfully. That territory is you, and no one else can explore it for you. Mapping your blockages, your tensions, your inner silences, is the starting point to open the portals, because what is not recognized cannot be transformed. When you take this first step, the body begins to react. A weight in the chest, a rising heat, a subtle change in the breath. These are not obstacles, they are guardians, vibrational guardians that test you before letting you cross over. And if you pass this test with presence and without haste, the second movement arises, the activation of the solar plexus. This center, located in the pit of the stomach, is not just an anatomical place. It is a vibrant field where memories are stored, silent pacts, agreements that perhaps you made before you were born. Tensions accumulate there, which are not static blocks, but currents waiting for a new channel. To guide them, the gesture of the circle is used, the fingertips tracing slow turns in the direction the body prefers, as if you were awakening an ancient seal, without violence, with softness and firmness at the same time. With each circle, with each breath, something begins to dissolve. You inhale as if you were drawing a thread of light from your chest. You exhale, letting that thread expand outward, releasing what you no longer need to keep. It is not a matter of understanding it with the mind, but of feeling it. And in that feeling, the plexus expands, beating, as if breathing with you. And a kind of silent bridge is formed between the plexus, the heart and the lower abdomen. Three centers that vibrate together, returning your body to its original architecture. Holding this practice not only changes how you breathe or how you feel, it changes how you face the world. The same situation that used to contract you now finds a body that expands, and that repeated expansion ceases to be a fleeting moment and becomes a new pattern, stable and lucid. At this point, transformation is not a destination, but a state made of conscious silence, not an emptiness, but a serene fullness, saturated with presence. Breathing is no longer just an exchange of air, but a vibrational code. Each inhalation invites the consciousness to settle deeper. Each exhalation releases what does not sustain your creation. The world begins to respond to that new vibration. It is no longer you reacting to the external. It is the external aligning with your frequency. And to seal this state, the ancient practice proposes a visualization. The three centers, lower abdomen, solar plexus and heart, connected by a beam of golden light that slowly rotates clockwise, forming a field that expands beyond the skin. This field is not a fantasy. It is a consequence of the real vibration you have awakened. And there, within that light, you can inscribe an intention, not in words,
but in vibration, as if the body itself had it engraved on it. To seal the process, a minimal gesture is enough, the fingertips gently touching the sternum, as if awakening a secret password. That touch not only closes the ritual, but creates a physical anchor to which you can always return. When you open your eyes after this journey, the environment seems different. The air has a different density. The colors seem more vivid. The sounds come through sharper. It is not imagination, it is reality responding to your new configuration. Because it is not the world that has changed. It is you, inhabiting it from another frequency. And perhaps the most surprising thing of all is that, in the middle of the spiral, memory appears. A memory that is not mental, but gestural. As it happened to Garrison, that initiate, who in the middle of practice, felt that the body no longer moved by effort, but by instinct. A memory that came from childhood, when he climbed a tree without thinking, knowing with certainty where to put his hands and feet. That bodily certainty returned as a deep access, a movement that did not need to be thought about.
The spiral began at the hips, ascended to the solar plexus, and passed through the heart like a warm bolt of lightning. Each twist dissolved something old, a fear in the stomach, a shadow between the chest and throat, a weight in the joints. I didn't think about healing. He just followed the rhythm the body dictated. And in that letting go, it touched the deepest root of his being. The space around him was reconfigured. The sounds became clear. The breath ceased to be air and became a dialogue with the whole. And the instant the spiral completed its course, the body stopped, but the field was still spinning inside. It was then that he understood that it was no longer he who made the movement. It was the movement itself. That is the real secret. Not to control, but to allow. The biggest barrier is not lack of ability, but the unconscious need to master what arises. Control stiffens the shoulders, contracts the plexus, breaks the flow, and without flow, the spiral dies. That is why, before beginning, the teaching proposes a small act of imperfection, releasing the jaw, allowing the hips to rotate out of symmetry, feeling how the weight is unevenly distributed. This break in the pattern confuses control and returns the command to the body's intelligence. Breathing accompanies the gesture. Inhaling opens space. Exhaling releases what is left over, until, over time, the spiral ceases to be a conscious act and emerges on its own, like a memory that never left. And when that happens, it is not only the body that moves, but the whole field that surrounds it. Because this spiral is not a trick or a passing technique, it is a call, and when you answer it, you can never be the same again. It is a reminder that life flows in curves, not straight lines, that everything expands and gathers in its own time, and that the power you were looking for outside was always inside you, waiting to be reactivated. Now, after going through all these passages of Charles Dickens' life, it is inevitable to stop for a moment to reflect on what his legacy really means. Because beyond the anecdotes, the curious facts, the applause and the literary glory, Dickens was, above all, a human being who went through a chain of lights and shadows. His novels were not born out of nothing. They were not simple exercises in creativity. Every page, every character, every dialogue was impregnated with his childhood memories. The hardships in the bitumen factory, the anguish of seeing his family torn apart by death, the rage against an unjust system that condemned thousands of children and adults to hopeless misery. In a certain sense, Dickens transformed his wounds into art, his pain into denunciation, and his experiences into fuel to give a voice to those who had none. That is what makes reading him even today, in the 21st century, not only a literary act, but also a profoundly human experience. When we meet Oliver Twist, asking for a little more food at the orphanage, we are not only facing a fictional character, we are facing the memory of thousands of exploited children in industrial England. As we follow the journey of David Copperfield, who struggles to find his place in the world, we feel in our own flesh the stumbling blocks of Dickens himself, who was searching for identity, dignity, and stability. Dickens not only wrote stories, but also pushed for social change. His novels circulated as a kind of mirror that English society could not ignore. No one came away unscathed after reading about debtors' prisons, workhouses for abandoned children, or factory abuses. And in a way, it helped to raise awareness and fuel public debate about poverty, inequality, and social justice. But let us not forget that Dickens was also a man of contradictions. He was capable of the greatest tenderness with the weakest, and at the same time he showed enormous harshness towards those who surrounded him personally. His conflictive relationship with his wife, his obsession with public reputation, his perfectionist character that sometimes bordered on the unbearable, are facets that remind us that geniuses, at the end of the day, are also made of clay. Perhaps that duality is part of what makes him fascinating. We don't need a perfect Dickens to admire him. What we need is to recognize how, with all his imperfections, he managed to create narrative worlds that still move us today and invite us to reflect on dignity, hope, and the struggle for a more just tomorrow. And if we think about the power of his words, we realize something else. Dickens was in essence an oral storyteller trapped in the body of a writer. His public readings, in which he dramatized his own stories, were true theatrical spectacles that captivated crowds. People laughed, cried, were moved and horrified by him. In other words, he not only left his mark in books, but also in the way we tell stories out loud, something that connects directly with what we do today in spaces like this one, on YouTube, where we continue to share stories to inspire, entertain, and leave a mark. Now, looking back on all this journey, it is worth asking, what is left of Dickens in the present? Perhaps the answer lies in understanding that his work is an invitation not to be indifferent, not to turn our backs on poverty, not to normalize injustice, not to let the most vulnerable remain outside the collective narrative. Because just as he transformed his pain into stories that moved consciences, we also have the possibility of using our voices, our talents, and our means to generate changes in our own environment. And another lesson remains: the importance of perseverance. Dickens could have given up in the bitumen factory. He could have resigned himself to a life of anonymity and frustration. But he chose to write. He chose to fight for his space in the world. He chose to transform his reality through words. That strength, that resilience, remains a powerful example for anyone facing hardship. In conclusion, the life of Charles Dickens is much more than the biography of a great Victorian writer. It is the story of a wounded boy who found in imagination a way of escape, of an ambitious young man who dared to dream beyond the limitations of his time, of a complex man who knew how to give voice to those who were silenced. It is, in short, the story of how literature can become a beacon of social conscience and a bridge between personal experience and collective memory. And now I want to leave you with a question that may accompany you beyond this video. Do you think that today, in our time, there are still writers, artists, or storytellers capable of having the same social impact that Dickens had in his time? Or do you think that literature no longer has that transformative power? I'd love to read your opinion in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed this tour through the life and legacy of Charles Dickens, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. That helps us to keep creating quality content for you and motivates us to keep telling these stories that deserve to be heard.